Okay, I've waited long enough to make this video, so I'm gonna make it. It's probably not what you expected, and I'm not gonna go all into what I really think. I might later, but I want to get y'all's thoughts, because I usually don't get into these videos right away. I usually like to see what I guess the public thinks about them. I'm not saying the public's usually wrong, but they're commenting on things that they think is right, whether or not it's how they feel. It's really not going off of what's really been going down forever. They rarely have all the information. The information is always skewed. It's always put out. The information that's put out there is usually not all of it, and they leave some of it out because, well, it's like all information or newsworthy stuff. They never really give you the full details, right? So, but I'm not going to go into what the video kind of should be about. I'm going to ask y'all guys a question. I want to hear what y'all have to say. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I actually gave this scenario out to a tournament director. When you hear what I'm about to say, I want you to really think about it. I can put this on there 1,000 times. Please don't comment on this unless you actually listen to the whole thing. Okay? What we're going to be talking about is it cheating? Is it breaking the rules? Is it both? Can you cheat without breaking the rules? Can you do things illegal that are still within the rules, but it's still illegal to do? There's a whole bunch to unpack here, and so that's why I want to bring this up. Okay? So let's dive on in. Here's the scenario. I'll cut to the chase. If we're fishing a tournament, okay, I've got a tournament coming up, let's say in a week, okay, and 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it really doesn't matter. But I go out to this body of water, okay, and I get on the edge of this water, right, where it's just dry land, and I dig a hole. I dig a hole 10 feet down and 10 feet wide, okay? And then I connect this body of water, right, this hole, okay, it's empty, and I connect it to the river or lake's edge, right? So I dig a little canal. Maybe it's that deep, an inch deep, to where water now can get into that hole, almost like what you would do it on the beach. We've all been on the beach. We've all dug holes in the beach and let the water get into that hole, right? And it fills up that hole. So what if that's what we did? Is we dug a hole, we connected it just by that much, just a little bitty canal that's an inch deep, that water runs into that and fills it up. So now it's all level, okay? And there's this 10-foot hole randomly that no one would ever think about, right? Maybe you hide it in the sense of it's off the beaten path, and you just dug this hole. And then you took this hole and you put 25 5-pounders in it, okay? And when you do this, maybe they're there for a week, 2 weeks, whatever it might be. Now, if you put those 5-pounders in there used to be rules. Well, let's not get into that just yet, okay? So now there's a hole that you dug, okay, that the fish can't get out of. They're sitting in this hole. No one knows about them. It's connected by water. It's right there. I mean, it's right. I mean, when I say it's right there, it's like if your boat came up to the shoreline, you could just almost flip right into that spot. I mean, it's just right there. And there's a whole bunch of big 5-pounders in there. And you went in the tournament and caught those 5-pounders and weighed them in, okay? I asked this for a number of reasons, but let's just say this. First of all, when I asked this to the tournament director, I said, what's illegal about that? No, what's not illegal? What rule did I break? because I don't think there's a rule that says I can't do that. Now, as I'm saying this, it's so absurd what I'm saying, in the fact of, I would hope, let's just play this out, because I from what I see on the internet, I'm always usually wrong. How many of y'all would say that's cheating? Right? How many would y'all say that's not really what we're about? Like, we're like in the fishing game, what we're about is going out there and trying to outfish people, right? I don't think anyone thinks that that's outfishing anyone. I don't know of anyone that would say that's not right. Maybe it's not cheating, maybe it's not right, but that shouldn't be allowed. Correct? Anyone that's fished a tournament would be like, you can't do that. But what if there's not a rule that was broken? So is it right? Is it right just because a rule's not broken? I would hope we'd all say that that's wrong. Okay? Because in reality, it's connected by water, and the fish are in there, and you caught them. You threw a bait in there, you threw a worm. Now, they probably hadn't eaten in a week, right? You threw a worm in there and caught some and weighed them in and win the tournament. None of us would think that that's right, correct? Now, they obviously probably didn't put some of that stuff in the rules. In years past, we have had rules on tournaments. A lot of rules state a couple different things. I've seen a bunch of them, and this is why I've always just perceived these as rules that just carry over. And what I mean by carry over is, I just assume they're in rules because I knew what they were for, right? So when they have a rule in there that says you can't stock a body of water, right? You can't stock fish in areas. To me, that's stocking fish, right? That's putting fish in a place where they can't really get out of, right? We've had a bunch of rules in tournaments. I don't know if they're in bass rules or FLW rule, MLF rules, whatever. I don't know if they're in those rules. I've seen those rules before, so I just assumed I know what that rule is there for. That's what it's there for. Is putting fish in places where they can't get out of, and you figuring out a way to get in. Okay, that's one. The second one is that water, and I put that connection of water. A lot of rules state that if water doesn't connect, right? If it's separate, like there's a land mass or anything in between there, you can't fish it, right? Now, with that being said, that's why if you put that in there and you connect it, now it's connected. Now, there's been some other rules in there that if you can't get your boat in there, right, then you're not allowed to fish it. That reasoning was because if you have like off limits areas as like swimming areas, right? Swimming areas usually have a no boats, right? They have it blocked off. They necessarily don't even have a rope around it, but they have buoys. And that's always been said, okay, if the buoys are there, then you're not allowed to throw in there because your boat's not allowed in there, right? That's what those were for. All these are rules that have been around for quite a few years. The reason these rules get in place are because of people doing things, and they do them. They read the rules so carefully that they find ways around the rules, right? They're like, okay, well, that rule's not in there, so I guess I can do this, right? Where pretty much they're probably not even going to ask the tournament director about it because, like, hey, I'm going to try to get away with this. I always thought there was two fishermen out there, two kinds of fishermen. Guys that read the rules so they don't break rules, right? So I'm a kind of guy, and most of the guys I know, we read rules and we interpret them in a way so we don't break them. And what I mean interpret them is they're fairly black and white. We understand what the rule's there for. We understand why it's there. I mean, if I read a life jacket rule, I understand it's a safety thing, right? I mean, in all honesty, having a life jacket on every time that motor starts, that's a good, decent rule, and it's a safety rule, right? We understand that. Not having more than 5 fish in a live well, that's a rule there, so you're not running around with 6 fish in case something happens or whatever. You know, that there's a rule in place for that, right? You're not trying to take advantage of something. That way, if you get on a school of fish, you're not just catching them one after another, and just throw them in the boat. And after they quit biting, they're all flopping around in there, and you figure out which ones are bigger, right? There's rules for that. Now, just because it's a rule in a tournament doesn't mean it's a law you've broken, right? And so that's one of them, right? If you're fishing a team event and there's 2 of you, by law, you're allowed 10 fish, by law. But by the rules of the tournament, you're not. You're not allowed 10 fish, you're allowed 5. See, and I think somewhere along the way, guys are looking at laws and rules of tournaments as 2 different things. There's laws that you have to obey, and then there's rules of tournaments. They don't always equal out. They're not always the same thing. And so just because you're legally allowed to do something doesn't mean in the rules and in that tournament you're allowed to. Legally, we're allowed to fish with live bait. Rules state you're not allowed to. Legally, a lot of places you're allowed to fish with 2 rods. In the rules, you're not allowed to. See, there's a lot of rules put in place for certain reasons, and it's all for advantage, right? The rules are there to keep the playing field as fair as possible, right? So when we look at those rules, we're just trying to figure out, okay, what am I not supposed to do? I understand that. And it makes it to where, like, okay, good, I'm putting my fishing ability against your fishing ability. I think there's other people that read the rules and go, how can I gain every advantage from these rules, and kind of maybe go around them or look at them differently, or like they study the rules in a different manner. Whereas I'm just trying to figure out how not to break them. Like, okay, I don't want to break that rule. Okay, what do I have to do? Not going, oh, that rule states this, but it doesn't technically state this, so I can kind of go around that. I mean, no, I know what that rule means. So when I asked the tournament director about this scenario, he's like, man, Todd, I don't really think you're breaking any rule. I was like, right. I said, well, what's funny is there's been a lot of no stocking rules, right, in place where you're not allowed to stock fish. But let's just say my buddies know I happen to dig this hole, right? And I didn't tell them to do anything with this hole, but they just kind of knew a tournament was coming up and they just happened to put fish in this hole for me. I didn't tell them to do it, right? See, that's where that rule, you look at that rule and you read the rule and you're like, well, I'm not really stocking the fish, someone else is. I mean, I didn't tell them to do it, but they are. So I didn't break that rule. See, that's the 2 different types of people. People who look at the rule and understand what the rule is there for, and people who go, well, how do I get around that rule? Look, I've probably done things against the law and against the rules unknowingly in my time. I've fished over 500 tournaments in my lifetime, probably 600 or 700, right? I don't think I've ever had a single, I know I've never been DQ'd. I don't even think I've ever been protested. I don't think I've ever had any of that stuff. I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means. But I try to be, and I try to understand, and I think every tournament director out there knows me, and might even get on here and go, you know what, that guy's called me. That guy's called me about a lot of things. And when I call them about that stuff, I don't give them my version of what's going to happen. I give them what my intention is. So if there's a rule out there that I'm like, hey, I want to touch up on this rule. What does this rule mean? We had one where it was you weren't allowed during sight fishing events, you weren't allowed to get on the water. Well, that means I can walk the bank, right? I'm not on the water, I'm walking the bank. And they're like, hey, no, you can't walk the bank. You know, someone else might be like, hey, I'm on the lake, right? We have a house on the lake, and can I just kind of go down by the water's edge? What if I happen to go down by the water's edge? I can see the water, right? But he's really going down there, and next thing you know, he's walking the entire pocket, looking, going, oh, you know, but hey, you told me I could because my house or my place I was staying was on the water. Same thing happened with marinas. Hey, I left my boat in a marina stall. Can I go down there buy it? Right? And then next thing you know, you look up and the guy's walking the entire marina stalls, all of them. Right? I mean, if you're going to ask about a rule, be truthful about what you're asking for. Being truthful about your intention. That way there's nothing they can really say against you. But a lot of guys don't view it that way. They're going to go a different route. I bring up that whole other scenario too, because that stalking, all those things, legal or not, I know the one thing was illegal. I wasn't allowed to dig that hole. Now I don't even have to read the rules or laws or anything like that. I mean, I think I know enough about laws to know that I can't just go start digging holes around most public lakes. They're not gonna like that. Like, I guarantee if I asked for permission from, whether it be the river authorities, because a lot of river authorities, have that. Most of the time it's probably not even homeowners, because usually homeowners, even though they think it's their land, they usually have an easement there. That's not going to be allowed. Like, I don't think if I went and it on someone's property, right, and dug a hole, that anyone would think that's legal. Now, my question is, if I dug this hole illegally 5 days before the event to gain advantage for that tournament, right? Because now the hole's dug and you didn't get in trouble for it, but you did it, and you didn't do anything against the rules per se, right? Do you think it's okay to break laws a week before an event to gain advantage, right? So then when the tournament comes around, you have an advantage, but you had to break a law to get it. Whether that's cutting down trees, right? Blocking entryways, putting a log across a creek so no one else can get across it, right? Removing rocks, putting rocks up, whatever it may be. Should that be allowed? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Should someone gain an advantage by doing something illegally before the tournament starts, or maybe before practice, things like that? These are all just valid questions. I'm just asking, right? I haven't brought up any scenario. Y'all can make the judge for that. I'm just asking, what do y'all think about that? Now, some of y'all, I love this one quote, and I'm gonna use this quote to the day I die. The greatest quote I've ever heard. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. I heard that all growing up, and I always kind of knew what that meant a little bit. That it meant, hey, if you're not like trying your hardest, and or if you're not whatever. The older I get, the more I look at that quote as going, no, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. No, if you ain't cheating, it means you're cheating, right? That quote basically says if you're not cheating, then you're not. No, it's not that you ain't trying. That means you're a cheater. It means you're a cheater. It does. I don't like that quote. Please, guys, don't ever use that quote again. That's a horrible quote. I don't know who came up with that quote and thought that was a good one. That's a horrible quote. That just means you're a cheater. That's all it means. Anyways, it's just some food for thought, guys. Like, I want to hear y'all's opinions, because to me, this is pretty black and white. It's pretty cut and dry for me. Like I said, I don't know. All these, the reason I went up and asked the tournament director, I wanted to hear what they had to say about it. I talked to tournament directors. I have no problem asking them what's right or wrong, what I'm allowed to do or not allowed to do. I want to know. I don't want there to be a scenario somewhere down the line where I'm like, hey, you said you couldn't do that. I've never run into that scenario. I've fished probably more tournaments than anyone in the country over the last 20 years. Guaranteed. I don't have problems with tournament directors about that. I don't have issues with them. I ask them, I call them. Any tournament director that gets on here will probably get on. If any of them watch this video, will probably be like, you know what, he does call me on these things. And we don't have problems with him. Like I said, I'm not perfect. I don't claim to be perfect. But I at least strive to be a little bit of like trying to do the right thing, right? That's what we're trying to do out here. I don't know. Tell me y'all's thoughts. Yeah, I'm out.
Never gonna stop if it's controlling you. I know that time can heal it all.